everything, from the furniture, the pictures, the bank accounts, the jewelry, everything, like locusts. And nothing, I mean the houses, first of all, are totally empty, because in the villages, what happened, the villages were not very rich, there wasn't much take from a Palestinian house in the village, and the houses were demolished, but in the city they weren't. That's why if you go today to Jaffa, and Haifa, and Nazareth, and Safad, you can still see the houses. But the houses are all that remains, because everything that was there was just looted. And where do you find it? You find it in Jewish houses. Apart from the books were all taken to the Hebrew University, where the professors who headed the operation of looting the books of the Palestinians explained that they did it so that the books would not be destroyed. They wanted, when we first asked them about it, they wanted us to commend them for their holy operation, which we did not share. But this is the picture we have to have in mind. Now, about this picture we have to think in two different ways. One is how this action by one human group against another human group is usually, how such an action is usually described in history books. In most cases, in the modern era, when such a thing happens, it's called ethnic cleansing, or a crime. And when it continues, and it continues until today in different forms, you are faced with an ongoing crime. So I think we should forget about the word conflict. This is the word I really hate. I teach a course on conflict. It's not a conflict. It's an ongoing ethnic cleansing operation by a colonialist movement, which has many other achievements. As I said, I was born in that country, so I know these achievements by heart. And many people who belong to that community and society are very good people. There's nothing to say about them. But the basic project that they are involved in, ever since its creation and until today, when it relates to the native population of Palestine, is an ethnic cleansing operation of colonialist movement. And that's not a conflict. The conflict is between two national movements, between two neighbors, between two superpowers. A rapist and a raped woman are not engaged in a conflict. A murderer and a murdered are not engaged in a conflict. An expeller and expelled, and an occupier and an occupied are not engaged in a conflict. That's called a spade a spade. If it's occupation, it's occupation. If it's expulsion, it's expulsion. There is nothing that protects the Israelis better than the concept of a conflict. Especially the liberal Israelis, or whom I call diet Zionists. They are very good at it, because the conflict creates this impression, this is Peace Now, and all these Amos Ozers and ABCDE, Yoshuas, and all these guys. They are involved in this, yes, we are to blame and they are to blame, so let's share the country, 15% for them, 85% for us. We'll have a state, they'll have a prison. Really, we are the people of peace. Unfortunately, there's no one to talk to on the Palestinian side, you know, these crazy Palestinians. But we are nonetheless, we'll carry with our bare hands the wagon of peace into its promised land, which is a Bantustan for the Palestinians and the greatest state of Israel. And this is because that's a conflict, and we want both sides to be satisfied and so on. So that's one aspect of the 1948 ethnic cleansing that is very important to remember. That it was a clear ideological operation of ethnic cleansing, which was inevitable given the colonialist nature of Zionism. And we should not be afraid to use these words. And we should not be afraid to repeat this narrative again and again until it sinks in that even the CNN can get it eventually. Because when you hear their historical sound bites, don't do it while you're eating, it's so disgusting. The second aspect of the ethnic cleansing operation that Israel took, and I described it in my book in great detail, is how the international community reacted. There was a conspiracy of silence. There were representatives of the International Red Cross on the ground. There were emissaries from the United Nations. There were journalists, leading journalists from the New York Times and other newspapers. We know, reading in the archives, that they actually reported quite accurately what was going on the ground. And they did not mince the words. They were using very harsh language, to describe what the Israeli soldiers, and before that, the Zionist soldiers were doing. But they decided, not they, actually the people who were editors or sat in the headquarters of these organizations, decided that it was wrong to publish these facts. It was better to be silent. Europe and America wanted to atone for the Holocaust by being silent about the crimes that were committed against the Palestinians. This was the deal. And the deal hasn't changed until today. It's still the deal. This is still the main deal of how the West, and Europe in particular, deal with its own past. The fact that the crime that was committed is not even acknowledged, either by Israel or by the West, is sometimes worse than the crime itself. And I'm kind of exceeding my time a little bit. Never mind. I'm such far away. We can do that. The fact that Europe wanted to atone by being silent has not changed until today. And there are two outcomes of this conspiracy of silence. One is from the Palestinian point of view. As I said, I think the lack of acknowledgement of the crime, or the denial of the crime, is sometimes as bad as the crime itself. The Palestinians are unable to put behind them the events of 1948, not because it was the worst crime ever one people committed against another. There were far worse crimes in history. They're still going on today, far worse crimes. But the fact that you go around the world as a Palestinian, as an individual or as a collective movement of people, and people say to you, it's not true that you were expelled, colonized, occupied. It's far worse than the occupation, the colonization, and the ethnic cleansing itself. We need at least to demand, we at least have to demand from intelligent people around the world, at least acknowledge. It's high time. Let's acknowledge the crime. Before even we talk about how to find a solution, how to deal with the consequences of the crime. I always think of my dear friend, Professor Walid Khalid, who was expelled from Jerusalem and came to the University of Oxford as a young postgraduate and wanted to write a dissertation about what happened in 1948, things he saw with his own eyes. And the people in Oxford told him, no, this is propaganda. You go and investigate another period in history. You are too charged politically. And his experience was that of so many other Palestinians. Whether you were a poet, a novelist, a common person who wanted to tell people that you were, one morning you woke up, Israeli soldiers came to your village, took you by force, sometimes massacred people in the village, raped some women, and took you out of the village, and you could never come back. That this was looked at as like a fabrication, or what you used to call, what people used to call Oriental imagination or Arab imagination. And you know that so many people, most of you are young people, so you don't know that from your own experience, but so many of the Palestinians of the late 1940s and 1950s report this frustrating experience. Wherever you go in the West, it doesn't matter where you came to, people would say, no, come on, this cannot be. Jews, after the Holocaust, could not have done such a thing. But this is the terrible thing about Zionism. That 3 years after the Holocaust, Jews committed these crimes against another. That's what's so horrible about it. And the second aspect, and with this I would add, the second aspect of this conspiracy of